Welcome to Conspiracist.
Great to be here.
Today, we're tackling a pretty significant hypothesis. The idea that governments might have deliberately covered up evidence of what's sometimes called a hidden hand influencing elections.
Right. And our goal here is really to objectively look at the reasoning, the information that's out there surrounding these kinds of claims.
Exactly. It's a complex topic, definitely sensitive for many. We want to provide a thorough understanding, sort of unpack the details without making it overwhelming.
And maybe start with the term itself, the hidden hand. It's not a formal term you'd find in election manuals.
No, not at all.
But it really captures a core belief you see in a lot of these claims, this idea of some unseen force, a deliberate interference messing with the outcome.
So intentional and concealed. That's the essence we're focusing on.
Precisely, that general concept.
Okay. So to give this some context, maybe we should look back a bit at the history of electoral interference. Now, our sources don't explicitly link past events to a modern hidden hand, but it's useful background, right?
Absolutely crucial background. Because, well, interfering in elections isn't actually new. If you look back, especially during the Cold War.
The CIA and KGB rivalry.
Exactly. Both the U.S., the CIA, and the Soviet KGB were quite active in trying to sway elections in different countries around the world.
Are there specific examples?
Well, former CIA officers themselves have pointed to operations in Italy back in 1948 as a prime example of the CIA's involvement.
And it wasn't just the U.S. side you mentioned.
No. The Soviets, they definitely made attempts to undermine U.S. candidates, too. Think Nixon, Reagan, there were efforts targeting their campaigns.
That's interesting. It underscores that this kind of foreign interference wasn't always about picking a side in, say, U.S. partisan politics.
That's a really important point. Historically, it was often driven more by geopolitics, by strategic interests, rather than favoring one domestic party over another in the target country.
Which kind of contrasts with how some people view election security concerns today, often seeing it through a very partisan lens.
Right. The historical context shows a different dynamic, often.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. More recently, say 2020, our sources talk about Russian efforts then. What did that involve?
Well, the information points towards a mix of tactics. Things like intelligence operations, sure, but also amplifying conspiracy theories, using social media for manipulation.
And the Burisma situation,
Yeah.
that was part of it.
Yes, that was cited as an example aimed at damaging Joe Biden's reputation specifically.
And did those tactics change by, say, 2024?
It seems there was maybe a shift, yeah. Less about perhaps direct intervention and more towards subtle manipulation.
How so?
Things like trying to worsen existing societal divisions in the U.S., maybe amplifying certain political viewpoints already present, like Majie Republican sentiments, for example.
In advocating for specific policy outcomes.
Right, like pushing for reduced U.S. aid to Ukraine, which aligns with Russian interests. It's a more indirect approach, it seems.
This all feeds into, I suppose, the increased scrutiny and, frankly, mistrust around recent elections we've seen.
Definitely. And observers like the Organization of American States Electoral Observation Mission, the OASIM, they documented this rise.
What did they find specifically?
Increased scrutiny, certainly, but also rising mistrust and even, harassment aimed at election officials and poll workers, particularly noticeable after 2016 and 2020.
That sounds like a really difficult environment for the people actually running the elections.
It really was. And it led to concrete changes, things like more security at polling places, setting up alert systems for staff, even de-escalation training for poll workers.
Just to handle the hostility.
Essentially, yes. And the OASIM also noted something else interesting. The politicization of routine stuff.
Like what?
Things that are usually just administrative background noise, Deadlines on the electoral calendar, how voter lists are maintained, the rules for mail-in ballots.
Suddenly becoming political footballs.
Exactly. And when those standard procedures get questioned constantly, framed as partisan issues, it can create fertile ground for suspicion, for the idea that maybe there is intentional manipulation happening.
So a watchful public is important, but you need trust in the institutions, too.
That's the balance the OASIM stressed. You need both vigilance and reliable, independent institutions for democracy to function.
Okay, so in response to some of these concerns, or perhaps just evolving practices, there have been reforms, right? And lawsuits.
Oh, absolutely. After the last general election, you saw activity on both fronts. Federally, a key piece of legislation was the Electoral Count Reform Act of 2022.
What did that do?
It clarified and revised the process for how Congress counts and certifies the Electoral College votes, trying to remove ambiguities that had been exploited.
And at the state level?
A huge amount of activity. The OACM counted something like 704 new election laws and regulations passed since 2020.
Wow, 704. What did they mostly cover?
Primarily things related to voting access and the procedures around absentee or mail-in voting. Lots of tweaks and changes there.
And alongside that, the lawsuits you mentioned.
A significant jump. By late September 2024, the number of election lawsuits filed before Election Day was apparently 3 times higher than in 2020.
3 times? Where were these mostly happening?
Concentrated in the battleground states, the politically competitive ones. And often, these lawsuits were challenging rules that had been in place for quite a while.
So constantly challenging the rules. That must create uncertainty.
It certainly can. And for someone who already believes in a hidden hand, that constant legal challenge, that churn, even if the challenges aren't ultimately successful, might look like evidence of instability or manipulation.
Right. It feeds the narrative. Let's shift to voter registration. How does that system work broadly?
Well, first, the scale. For the 2024 election, we're talking about roughly 245 million citizens eligible to vote. Turnout was around 64.5%.
And how do people get registered? Is it uniform?
Not at all. It varies quite a bit state by state. Deadlines, requirements, the actual process, lots of differences. And many states have been changing their laws since the last presidential cycle.
What kinds of changes?
There's a trend towards expanding access. More states adopting automatic voter registration, or AVR, where you get registered automatically through the DMV, for instance.
Online registration, too. Same day.
Yes, online registration is more common now. And some states allow same-day registration, where you can register and vote on Election Day.
Which sounds convenient, but I imagine it sparks debate.
It does. It's often framed as a balance expanding access versus ensuring electoral integrity. These changes are frequently part of that ongoing discussion.
And is there one big list of all voters somewhere?
No, the U.S. doesn't have a national voter registry. Each state manages its own voter rolls.
How do they keep them accurate then?
They use various methods. Often they cross-reference their lists with data from federal agencies, think Social Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security, sometimes the Postal Service's National Change of Address database, trying to verify identities and addresses.
But that decentralized system, with 50 different state lists, could that be seen as a vulnerability by some?
It's certainly a point of scrutiny for those worried about potential manipulation or a hidden hand. The lack of a single, unified database can raise questions about consistency and security, even with the verification checks states perform.
Okay, let's talk tech. Voting machines, audits. What's the landscape there now?
In 2024, the vast majority of voters, nearly 70%, were in places using hand-marked paper ballots. You fill in the oval, and then it's fed into an optical scanner.
Like standardized tests.
Pretty much, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then about 25% used what are called ballot marking devices, or BMDs. These often help voters with disabilities or just print out a completed ballot to be scanned.
And the purely electronic ones, DREs.
Direct recording electronic systems, they're becoming less common for all voters. Only about 5% use them in 2024, which is a decrease from 2020.
Why a big
But a lot of it comes down to the paper trail. There's a strong preference now for having a physical paper record of each vote. It's absolutely essential for doing meaningful recounts and audits.
Right, the audits. How important are they?
Hugely important. Post-election audits serve a dual purpose. First, to verify that the election outcome reported was actually correct, and second, to build public trust and confidence in the results.
How do they work? Is it just recounting everything?
Not usually. Traditional audits often involve manually checking batches of paper ballots and comparing the hand count to the machine count for those batches.
Right.
But there's another type gaining traction, risk-limiting audits, or RLAs.
Risk limiting. How does that work?
It's statistical. Instead of checking whole batches, RLAs look at a random sample of individual ballots. They count those votes and use statistics to determine if there's a high probability that the originally reported outcome is correct.
So you don't necessarily count every ballot.
Not unless the initial sample raises red flags. The RLA process continues, sampling more ballots if needed, until there's enough statistical evidence to be confident that a full recount would just confirm the winner. It's designed to be efficient, but statistically rigorous.
And who does these audits?
Ideally, neutral investigators. Their job isn't to push for one candidate or another. It's simply to detect any significant errors in how the votes were tabulated.
And can these audits actually change an election result?
Some types of audits do have the legal teeth to escalate things if they find major problems. They can trigger a deeper review or even lead to the correction of an incorrect outcome.
Seems like communicating about these audits would be really important for that trust-building aspect.
Absolutely critical. Election officials need to be transparent about what kind of audit they're doing, how the ballots are being randomly selected, what security measures are in place. Clear communication is key.
Okay, let's pivot to something that definitely fuels mistrust. Disinformation and conspiracy theories. Big factor in 2024, wasn't it?
Oh, undoubtedly. And it's not just a U.S. problem. Our sources point to a global rise in organized social media manipulation campaigns. Disinformation has become, unfortunately, a fairly common political tactic worldwide.
And specifically regarding elections.
The concern is about false or misleading stories deliberately created to make people doubt the democratic process itself, to question whether elections are valid at all.
Are there examples of the kinds of narratives that were circulating in 2024?
Yes. The ADL's Center on Extremism tracked several. One persistent theme was the baseless claim that immigrants were somehow helping Democrats steal the election.
How?
Various versions, including wild conspiracy theories about the Biden administration intentionally bringing migrants to swing states to vote illegally. Completely unsubstantiated, of course.
Any other examples?
There was a particularly nasty false rumor about Haitian migrants in Ohio supposedly killing pets used to fuel the theory they were being imported to help Kamala Harris win. Utterly false.
Just designed to inflame.
Exactly. Another common one, pushed heavily by former President Trump, was the idea that election fraud is basically the only reason Republicans ever lose. Again, widely refuted by evidence, and some argued it might even discourage Republican voters.
What about non-citizen voting specifically?
The idea that non-citizens are being enrolled to vote on a large scale, deliberately, to benefit one party, there's just no evidence of a broad conspiracy like that.
And claims of foreign meddling.
Those circulated too, sometimes suggesting Israeli meddling, or even in white supremacist circles, the idea that Trump was somehow selected by Jewish people, just a range of unfounded theories.
And now we have AI to worry about too. Deepfakes.
That's the emerging threat. The FBI and CISA have warned about AI being used to create very convincing fake videos or audio or other deceptive content that looks like real news or uses paid influencers
To disrupt elections. Is the threat mainly foreign?
Interestingly, while foreign actors could use these tools, some experts believe the bigger threat might actually come from domestic groups using these AI technologies to spread disinformation within the U.S.
So what's being done to combat all this?
Well, intelligence agencies, security folks, cybersecurity teams are working on it. Plus, you have journalists and academic groups doing fact-checking.
It's tough, isn't it? Especially if people live in different information bubbles.
That's a huge challenge. The partisan split in where people get their news and who they trust means voters might be operating with very different and sometimes inaccurate sets of information.
And there's a psychology to it too, right? Why people believe these things.
Yeah, there's research on that. Things like agency detection, our tendency to see intentional actions behind events, even random ones. And sometimes, believing a conspiracy theory can give people a feeling of having secret, superior knowledge.
Let's tackle a couple of specific claims head-on. Non-citizen voting, you said there's no evidence of a broad conspiracy.
Correct. Federal law prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections. While, isolated administrative mistakes might happen very rarely, there's no evidence supporting claims of widespread, intentional non-citizen voting.
Okay. What about the push for hand-counting all ballots instead of using scanners?
That often comes from distrust of the machines, frequently fueled by those conspiracy theories we mentioned.
But is hand-counting actually better, more reliable?
Not necessarily. While it seems transparent, hand-counting large numbers of ballots is actually very prone to human error. People get tired, they make mistakes.
Especially in close races.
Exactly. Small counting errors that might not matter in a landslide can become huge points of contention in a close election. We've seen hand recounts where the tallies didn't match the original precisely because of human error during the recount itself.
And it must be slow and expensive.
Incredibly slow, requires massive staffing, and is very costly compared to efficient scanning technology combined with robust audits like RLAs.
And the claims of widespread fraud benefiting one side, what does the evidence actually show?
Overwhelmingly, investigations and analyses find very little evidence of voter fraud on a scale that could change the outcome of major elections. Organizations like the Heritage Foundation, which actively looks for fraud cases, found virtually none in Georgia's 2020 and 2022 general elections, despite millions of votes cast.
So believing in massive fraud requires what?
It essentially requires believing that one entire political party, along with all its lawyers and observers, was somehow completely negligent or incapable of finding and proving this widespread fraud existed.
Okay, so given all this mistrust and these claims, what are election officials doing to try and build confidence? Transparency seems key.
It is. And we see examples of officials making real efforts. Like in Weber County, Utah, they actively use social media, posting videos explaining how ballots are processed, the security steps involved.
Showing people how it works.
Exactly. Or Orange County, California, they had plans to live stream many parts of the process. The canvassing, the tabulation, even the risk-limiting audits. Plus, allowing in-person public observation.
What about other places?
Boulder County, Colorado is another example. They routinely invite the public and media to watch their RLAs and other post-election checks. They were even looking into setting up cameras for remote viewing.
So trying to open the doors, essentially.
Yes, these transparency measures are really vital. By letting the public see how things operate, officials can directly counter misinformation and provide tangible proof of the security and accuracy involved.
So wrapping this up, the idea of a hidden hand deliberately manipulating elections. It's a powerful narrative for some.
It is, but when you objectively evaluate the information we have, what emerges is, well, a much more complex picture. You've got historical context, you have evolving security measures, constant legal and administrative adjustments.
And this overlay of disinformation really complicates things.
It absolutely does. So understanding all these different factors, the technology, the laws, the human element, the audits, the transparency efforts, and the challenge of disinformation all within our existing system, that's really essential for getting a nuanced view of these claims. There aren't easy answers here.
A complex issue with many layers. Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.